Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline Magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual business, their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. This week we've got a kind of different show because we are going to talk about the historic things that happened yesterday in Parliament, obviously Boris Johnson. So let me introduce you to the panel. Today we've got David Owen, CEO of GFirst LEP, Ian Mean, MBE, Director of Business West, Chairman of GFirst LEP, Forest of Dean Business Enterprise, ex-editor of the Citizen, Echo and Western Daily Press. What a bit of a mouthful. David, where are all your titles, mate? Anyway, we won't go into that. Sam Holliday, Business Development Manager, Federation of Small Business of the Southwest of England. We got Talitha Nelson, CEO of Gloucestershire Foundation Trust and a true champion of the third sector. And finally, last but not least, we've got Neill, Ricketts, CEO of the SARE, and he's also chair of the Forest of Dean Business Partnership. Welcome, guys, to Punchline Talks. Before I start, I just want to thank our sponsors, Hazelwood's, business advisors and tax advisors, and just great guys. I'm going to quickly review the newspapers courtesy of the BBC. So here we go. The headlines. The Times. Whoops, let me just get that. The Times. Johnson throws in the towel. The Guardian. It's almost over. The Financial Town. Johnson quits defiant to the end. The Daily Telegraph. PM's long goodbye leaves UK in a state of paralysis, if I could say it. Downfall, says the Eye. The Metro, leave means leave. The Daily Express, thank you, Boris, you gave Britain back its freedom. The Daily Mirror, clinging on for one last party. The Daily Mail, what the hell have they done? The Sun, PM's bittersweet exit, kiss goodbye. The Daily Star, bozo, that legacy is full of. Got a cute dog, a good party organizer, a nice wallpaper. Welcome everybody to Punchline Talks. Let's start with you today, Sam. Where do you start, Sam?
Well, do you know what? I thought those headlines kind of summed it all up, really, because I mean, I've got the Times here. Johnson throws in the towel. Now, that is an analogy to boxing. Now, if you throw in the towel, you leave the ring. You go away, you're defeated. The thing is, he's thrown in the towel, but he's staying in the ring. And this is the thing I don't understand. And I'm sure we're going to talk all about the politics and the runners and the riders. But if you think of it from a business perspective, which is the one thing that unites us all, I don't know who's running the country. We've had 3 chancellors in the last 4 days. We had Rishi. We had somebody else has then resigned. So honestly, it's chaos. And if this had been a quiet time when nothing was happening in the world, you think, well, maybe they can go through it. We're sort of semi-involved in a war. We've got the worst cost of living crisis we've seen for 40 years, and I have no idea who's running the country. So we don't do party politics, the FSB, but we do want to see good, strong government. So if I was involved in the Tory party, and we do have some very influential MPs locally, I would actually ask them to make this official. So the towel is in the ring, and then somebody else can take over, because it's going to take a while, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of stuff in the papers, like who might be the next prime minister. The Tories need to do all their hustings and all that. It's going to take some time. But the idea of what is in effect a lame duck prime minister for another 4 to 5 months, no one's going to take him seriously on the world stage or locally. So throw in the towel, exit.
Okay, Sam, was he right to go then?
I don't think he had any choice. I mean, at the end of the day, I think there's been many times. I think we've debated on this program before. Would he go for various lies and things? There's always going to be something that was going to come up with Boris. I don't think anybody doubted this today. Nobody thought he was going to live. He was going to be a prime minister as long as, say, Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair. It was never going to happen. It was always going to crash quite spectacularly. But it was quite. I think the way it sort of unravelled as Tory MP after Tory MP suddenly decided that he wasn't right for the job. And I'm thinking, how did they not know this before? So I think he was right to go. But please, Mr. Johnson, just go and let someone else take over, because business and the world needs a proper British Prime Minister with a proper British cabinet.
Neill?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, the options for them are to put in, for the deputy to stand up or to put in an interim PM. I'm not quite sure that that is as good a plan as or any better than kind of waiting. I'm not saying, Sam, that he should stay or he should go, but actually, you know, the biggest issue for business is the unsettled period that we're now going to go through as the process rolls out, no matter who's in charge. So even if, you know, I personally thought that Raab did a fantastic job when the PM was ill, you know, with COVID. He stood up. He's a proper statesman. I know there's been issues, like there has been with all of our politicians recently, but I think it's that period of not knowing what's going on, which is going to kill us. You know, I think that's the big issue here. So maybe they should just get on and do the process, but do it as quickly as they can, you know, and that would be my advice.
Okay, Ian.
Well, I agree with both those comments. As an ex-Daily Mail man, looking at their take on this, what the hell have they done? Now, the Mail, very right-wing paper, don't agree with them at all, actually. And when you look at the other papers, you know, they've got it right. The Telegraph, PM's long goodbye leaves UK in a state of paralysis. That's what Sam and Neill have been talking about. We are in a state of paralysis at the moment. And in terms of business, they want an absolute clear vision. He promises not to bring in any new legislation, but I just can't see why he doesn't go immediately. And I have to say, I've never met the man myself. I had dealings with people close to him. But Brian Reid in the Telegraph, the headline on his piece is this: a lifelong chancer, shallow, disloyal, deceitful, narcissistic, and utterly convinced he was born to rule. That sums it up to me. In his farewell speech, that was no sort of conciliation, absolute arrogance to the end. And the Daily Mirror today, their headline, which you pointed out, clinging on for none last party, it appears that he wants a big wedding reception at Chequers on July 30. So that's why they say he's clinging on for one last party. But in terms of business, you know, he's got to go. John Major is right in all the papers today. That this is a crazy situation. I heard Geoffrey Clifton Brown on Today, the Cirencester MP, saying that ship has sailed. I think they've got to sort this out. He should be out of there as quickly as possible.
Hold on, Neil. Let's go to David. David, Ian's right about the business community. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've lost count of the number of times that either on shows like this or on other media outlets, we talk about how the thing that business want all the time is a bit of consistency, a bit of certainty, because the world's a really uncertain place at the best of times. And what business really needs is some certainty, and some certainty in legislation and in an approach from government. Yeah, we have got a cost of living crisis, which is affecting millions of families all across the country who are really going to struggle to pay their energy bills when it comes to the autumn, even with the measures that have been put in place. But what's often forgotten, and I think you're one of the few outlets, Mark, actually in Punchline who's talked about this, is that energy prices are going through the roof for businesses as well. We've got businesses who are really struggling to pay the increasing costs of energy. So we've got a massive problem. We've got a war going on in mainland Europe for the first time in my memory. Yeah, we've got all sorts of challenges around implementation of Brexit and seeing what comes out of it. We've got COVID rates going up again. Yeah, we talk about being out of COVID. The reality is we've still got a pandemic going on, and hopefully things don't get any worse than they are. But we know rates are going up and hospitalizations are going up. And we all need some certainty. Business needs some certainty. And it needs government to be making some decisions around the economy. So we were due to have the Prime Minister and the Chancellor do a huge announcement on the 12th of July talking about the future economic strategy of the country. We've been waiting for that for some time. We were looking forward to getting some clarity on where the priorities were going to be. And I can't see that happening now. And I can't see that speech happening probably until the autumn. And so it leaves everybody with that in that state of uncertainty. And that's, you know, aside from any of the politics involved, that's what business needs. It needs that certainty. And
before I move on to Ian, back to Neill, then we'll go to Talitha. One of the things you didn't mention was all the problems they got in Shanghai with with COVID and the lockdown of China. That hasn't even filtered through yet. So massive problems coming down the tracks. Ian, you were going to add something.
Well, just two things there. I was chairing an organ donation meeting yesterday at Cheltenham Royal. Everyone's now got to wear masks again, even in those meetings. Now, I don't think people have got this, but this is getting worse. And we've got to be very, very careful. And number two, on what David is saying, there's one sort of slight chink of light here in that Greg Clark, former business secretary, is now back as interim. Now, he was very pro-LEP, wasn't he, David?
Yeah,
And
he's an excellent minister.
I think, you know, he's a bit of a grey guy, but he also chaired the Fusion Committee, and we're very hopeful. And I've just written something for you, Mark, saying I believe we're going to get it. So I hope that he will steady the ship a bit. But our problem is we're going to get no decisions.
That's the big problem, isn't it? No decisions, uncertainty. Neill, to you, and then over to Talitha.
So all I was going to say is, very much echoing that. I think it is a really good appointment that Greg Clark's back in. I've worked with Greg as part of the LEP, and he is a fantastic minister. What I was going to raise is the fact that the immediate problem is we don't have a government. Okay, so we've had a lot of resignations, 55 people or 54 people, whatever it is. Those positions need to be filled. Now, those positions will not be filled while Boris is still in the chair. And so for me, the immediate concern is not whether Boris goes or stays, it's whether or not we've got a viable, constitution, because at the moment we don't have one. We have some big seats that aren't filled. And the other thing I wanted to raise was the fact that this election or this leadership race will now be a massive distraction to politics, and we don't need a distraction at the moment. We've got enough going on without kind of petty politics getting in the way.
Not being funny, we've got a war going on in Europe. We don't need a war going on in Westminster. Talitha, sorry, let's go over to Talitha. I haven't had a chance to call you in yet. Thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks. Obviously, what's your thoughts on it all?
I mean, to be honest, everything's been said. I mean, the concern for me is any business, you succession plan and you have somebody ready to take over. And the worrying thing is, yes, I believe he probably should go. But just to oust someone and not have a plan, I just think is utterly disastrous and quite frightening, because it leaves us so vulnerable, with the war going on. You just think Putin's thinking, brilliant, now this is my opportunity to do something. It's just really worrying that this is leading a country, not just a tiny business with 5 people. This is just leading the country, no succession planning, no plan in place. I just think I just don't agree with getting rid of someone and not having a plan.
I thought that's what you had a deputy prime minister for.
Yeah.
I thought that the idea was if anything happened to Boris, Robs should step into the plate in itself.
I think Neill said that, and I think that's a very good call. Actually, I think that is the whole point of having a deputy. If a football manager goes, well, he's normally got an assistant manager that steps up until they find someone else. They don't need to go through an electoral process. I think Dominic Raab's already there, and he's quite an experienced guy. You may not like him or want him to be the leader, but he could do the job. I think he'd have more credibility at this stage than Boris would.
Well, let's talk about.
I mean, I do agree. Your deputy should step up, but I think for him, dismantling the Human Rights Act and the various things he's been doing lately, I think he's become terribly unpopular, and I don't think he's in touch with what's going on. But so I think they're leaving themselves very open to criticism, and that's why I don't think they can make the decision.
Let's talk about credibility. Let's talk about our own MPs. Okay. So, we have our 6 MPs, some stood out more than others. How do you think they come out of this process? I'll go to you first, Ian.
Not well.
6 MPs.
Not well at all. I just reiterate what you said when you try to get hold of Richard Graham. And I see he's suddenly at the last hour, I'm just reading the Western Daily Press, comes out with how for 10 years he's been promoting the ASEAN community. A lot about himself, actually, which is sort of a bit par for the course. Our MPs don't come out of it well at all. Siobhan, of course, has just had a baby. Congratulations to her. So I don't think we should be critical there. But I don't think they have come out of it with clear opinions and honesty. That's how I see it.
Okay, Ian, we'll go over to Neill because he's based out in the Forest of Dean. What about Mark Harper? He's been calling for Boris to go a long time.
Well, the two that kind of brought him down or were part of it are obviously Mark Harper, who's been calling for Boris to stand down for a long time, and will, in my opinion, be part of the election, the re-election process. But we've also got Alex Chalk from Cheltenham, who resigned from his position as well, which was one of the 54. So I think we've created this situation now. The cards were on the table a long time ago. This isn't something that's just happened. This isn't something that's just come into the news. There has been incident after incident after incident. But, party politics plays a big part. And so there's, the issue we have at the moment is we have very fractured parties. It's not just the Conservative Party, it's the Labour Party as well. We have big differences within all of the current parties, or the major parties. And so I don't think there's, there is a plan, and I don't think anybody considered what they were doing, all the ramifications of what they were doing before they did it.
Well, it's all a bit of a mess. David, before I go back over to you, Ian, David, what's your thoughts? You know every single one of these MPs, you've sat with them.
Yeah, we work really closely with them, and I have to say that they're all very supportive of us, and we work very well with them. I think that the challenge is a broader challenge, and that's actually about seeing the demise of people's trust in politics more generally, and that's not a criticism of Boris or anybody else. It's a general point about the way in which our politicians behave, particularly at a national level, and what we've seen happening at an international level as well, with Trump in America in particular, is that people are just losing faith in politicians. And that's really sad, because politicians, whether we like them or not, whether we vote for them or not, when they turn up in government in whichever country we're in, run the country. And we've got to have some faith and some trust in them. And sadly, so much of that trust over the course of my lifetime has been eroded away. And I think Ian said it, what we're looking for from anyone is honesty and openness, and straight answers to straight questions. And you struggle to hear a politician being interviewed giving a straight answer to a straight question, and that's incredibly frustrating. And it's been happening for the last, since I've been interested in politics, the last 30 or 40 years, it's been happening, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.
I'll tell you what is getting worse. Sorry, David, what is getting worse is that the media is not getting invited to things as well. You can get quite frozen out if you say the wrong thing. It's not as open as it used to be.
The other thing, Mark, is that local media is disappearing as well. So, in Ian's halcyon days of being editing the Citizen and the Echo, where politicians were frightened about what was going to be on the front page, it was going to be questioning the decisions they were making. Those days have gone. Local media now largely is reprinting press releases from different organisations, and that's sad as well, because there's not interrogation of decision making at a local level. That's because writing about politics is expensive, because you've got to get 2 or 3 sides of the story. You want to do it properly. We know that. Ian, I'm going to go back over to you, Sam, because you had your hand up first. Then back over to Neill, and back over to Ian. Sam.
Yeah, I'll just talk about local MPs. I would say that I think Mark Harper deserves the most respect, actually, because he's been very consistent. He stood up and said things that when nobody else was agreeing with him, and I found it all a bit puzzling this week that suddenly, I come from Tamworth, so my MP is the one that's caused all this, into my old MP Christopher Pincher. But there's been so many things, there's been so many times when Boris could have gone and these MPs stayed silent. Then suddenly, because Rishi Sunak went and Sajid David, then all of a sudden some of these MPs discovered their conscience, and I found that a riddle hard to take. But the most farcical ones for me were the 2 people who accepted the role of Chancellor and Education Secretary, and then 24 hours later resigned. Apparently, do you know they're entitled to compensation for leaving their roles? I mean, that's when it becomes a farcical. I think David is spot on. We've got a real problem in this country that nobody likes. That people are very, very cynical about politicians. I think that's just going to get worse now. And then some of them MPs suddenly discovering this conscience because they'd seen 40 other MPs discover theirs. That doesn't sit right to me.
No, it does stick in the throat, doesn't it? Neil, you want something?
I was going to, I mean, the kind of elephant in the room is our political system now fit for purpose? You know, it hasn't changed in 200 years. It's very antiquated, you know, it's very confrontational. If you take, you know, other areas, say, for instance, like Singapore, they're quite able to put out 20-year cross-party strategies. Well, we can't get through a couple of weeks at the moment without things changing. And so it's very hard from a business perspective to plan anything. You don't know whether, you know, the direction of the company at the moment. And we haven't done for a long time, to be honest. In Europe, out of Europe, you know, Scotland in, Scotland out, you know, Wales doing their thing, not knowing where we are with Brexit. I don't think it's fit for purpose anymore. I really don't think that that it works.
Okay, Ian,
well, just harping back to what Dave was saying, trust is everything to me. I had an old tenet as an editor, two things. One, you need to be trusted. Two, you need to be accurate. And anyone who lied, to me anyway, was sacked. And, you know, we just don't have this sort of feeling at all. Look at these politicians that are now in the frame, and then go back to, say, the Thatcher years, and I'm old enough to remember some of these big beasts. And you listen to Michael Heseltine now in his 80s. He speaks great truth. These people don't seem to have any sort of backbone at all. Enthusiasm for the truth, to me, is pretty important. And you're right on local media, it's a clickbait operation. You do brilliantly because you do what a newspaper used to do. You know, I've been in this business a long, long time. I've had to develop with Sam digital. I've no operation of that, but no one looks at issues. People need to be taken to account. I'm an ex-Daily mailman. You look at the paper today and you think, where are they at? You know, it must be the wrong angle, but they believe what they're doing. And you have to be believing that what you're doing is right. And our politicians, David's right, people have just lost trust in them, totally. You know, if you stood as MP, Mark, you'd probably get in.
That's very kind of you, but I'll never do that. David.
I was just going to say as well, I think it's the adversarial nature of everything now, and it's not just politics, it's everything. Everything we talk about in, well, probably globally, but certainly from what I see in the UK, you either got to be for or against it. And if you're on the other side to someone else, then they're an idiot, you hate them, they're terrible, they're an awful person. And we've got to get away from that, because actually the vast majority of things that we talk about or disagree about are shades of grey. And we should be much more comfortable about shaking hands with someone, being friendly with them, but disagreeing with them on a particular issue. And I think our media needs to be held to account on this. You know, you look at some of the headlines in the national media on a daily basis, and they're basically trying to make an enemy of everybody. And that is not healthy. That's not how you grow a healthy community or a healthy country, by pitching everybody against everybody else. We need to be working together on things. So we need less of that adversarial nature generally in life.
And it's funny what Ian said about credibility and things. Not being funny, the old days, the old politicians, if they did something wrong, they resigned. They fell on their sword. And I think this is the biggest problem that we've got nowadays. Nobody bloody throws in the towel because it's all about themselves.
Sometimes for very minor things as well. You look in history and you see people resign for the most, what would seem minor things. I tell you what, it sounds strange, but I had a bit of respect for the poor old chap that was looking at naughty pictures and said he was looking for tractors. You know, I don't think that's the worst crime that's ever happened in history, but he made the decision and he resigned. And apparently they put lots of pressure not to resign because they didn't want the by-election. But that is more old-fashioned politics, whereas some of the people just cling on for dear life. And I will say something about the media as well, because Ian remind me of this. When we were both editors and that, we were probably always, I was always accused of being a left-winger, a right-winger and everything. We had a colleague called Andy Cooper, who Ian remember well, who once invited somebody who accused his paper of being a Labour rag to a meeting with somebody who accused him of being a Tory rag, and he didn't tell them both. He invited them both into the room. They said, tell me why my paper's biased. and they both say it from different angles. But what David said is absolutely right. That's because we don't want people who say, "Oh, I want my news to be unbiased." A lot of people are very political. They don't. They want it to reflect their bias, and that's a totally different thing.
And I think everything's been changed by social media. That is the problem. If you say one thing that somebody else doesn't agree on, everybody comes out, and there are people stoking it for the sake of stoking it because they want the more followers. And you know, there was the person who was totally anti-vax, and I remember her son coming out and saying, actually, this isn't what my mother believes at all. She's only doing it to get more followers. Neil, you had your hand up.
I can't remember now. Sorry, Mark. But, I was stunned by the social media thing. But
nothing new on this show, then, mate.
Well, no, actually, I've got a few notes here, so don't worry. I do worry that so I went to the FBI MI5 briefing on Wednesday, and there are two parts to that story. Firstly, you know, the message is our enemy is not within the UK, our enemy is in China.
Most importantly, you've just revealed you're an MI5 agent, Neil. That's brilliant.
No. I said I attended a meeting. I didn't say that I was a spy. So, right. Although if I was a spy, would I admit to being a spy? I'm not sure. But
Ricketts,
anyway,
Neill, Ricketts. There you
go. This is a good one, Neil.
The next 3 months are going to be extremely challenging because, you know, we've got all these threats from Europe, and we haven't, and we've not got our eye on the ball, and that's to me that's the biggest issue we've got here.
Totally, Talitha. I mean, for the third sector and the charity sector, I mean, how are things at the moment on the sort of economy-wise? You know, with the cost of living, because when people find it tight, we stop giving to charity. So, you know, you guys rattling the tin and all the good work that you do behind the scenes, is that what's starting to happen?
Yeah, I mean, on every level. I mean, the cost of living crisis is huge. I mean, I've picked up one of your stories later, just looking at the stats from one of the banks in terms of how much money people have sat there. I think 80% have only got £500 sat in their bank. So the cost of living crisis, the next couple of years are going to be so tough. And I think just going back to the points of accountability, you know, I think when things are tough, we really need strong leadership. We really need something to believe in, because we'll talk ourselves into an absolute recession because of the doom and gloom. And, you know, if we don't have some positive leadership, or we don't have some strong leadership, or we don't feel we're heading in a direction, you know, the country is so vulnerable. And the cost of living crisis, the next couple of years is going to be incredibly tough. It's obviously going to hit the third sector in lots of different ways. And unfortunately, in any crisis, it's always our most vulnerable that are hit the hardest. And that's worrying. And actually, you know, if you're thinking 80% of people with their bank accounts have got £500 in there, it's our neighbours, it's our family, it's our friends who are going to hit the charities. It's not the people we think, oh, you know, there's a certain section of people that use charities. It's going to be everybody needing to maybe look at that food bank. And actually, the third sector picks up where the statutory sector just cannot support. So it's so important that we support the third sector, and we support all of the infrastructure organisations that are going to pick up the pieces, because there's going to be a lot of people struggling, as everybody knows.
And we all need those charitable organisations, you know, from the emergency helicopter services to cancer care to hospices, all those things. Of course, they're all rattling the tin. They all want some money. Let's just go back to Boris and everything else, as we are kind of trickling out of time. I mean, who would we pick to be the next PM? So I'm going to go around between you all. David, who would you like to see in the hot seat?
I have no idea, Mark, but I wanted to talk about one of your punchline stories, so I'm going to steal the microphone and do that, because we launched our Made in Gloucestershire campaign this week.
Hey.
There's much we can be proud of in Gloucestershire, and actually our economy is pretty resilient. We go into recessions later than anybody else. We come out earlier. And the Made in Gloucestershire campaign is all about supporting those, at the moment, local food and drink producers, and giving them some more coverage so that we can all buy their products. Go to madeingloucestershire.com, I think it is, but it's on the Punchline website. You can find the details and the link into it, and it's really important that we support our food and drink producers, and we'll move on to other businesses in time as well with that campaign.
I just want to say, by the way, I asked you a straight question. You noticed, guys, you didn't answer it at all.
I did. I said I don't know.
Fair enough. I'm going to get my fence and bring it round your house. Ian, who do you reckon would be who would you like to see to be the next Prime Minister?
Well, what
Give us a
bunch
favourite.
they are. I don't think any of them are brilliant at all when we compare with some of the previous governments. I think I'd go for Sajid David. I think he's done a great job. I think, he seems to have the sort of trust people want. I think some of the people are not in the frame are very good. I know Tom Tugendhat is excellent, but I have to say they're not a great bunch of people. Zahawi, I think, has real prospects, though. He seems to have a go, and so I'd go for Javid and Zahawi.
Okay, Sam.
Well, it's very interesting because I've been looking at all the runners arise, and I will say one thing that I find quite encouraging about the country and diversity. The three most popular candidates with both the Tories and with the public as a whole, Rishi Sunak, Nadeem and Sajid Javid, all British Asians. I think that says a lot about the Conservative Party because it's been accused in the past of being racist and so forth, but I don't see such prominent members of the ethnic community in the Labour Party, for example. Now, of the three, I think Rishi's the one that's always impressed me. I think he's articulate. I think he's intelligent, and I think he's very trustworthy. I think the problem he's got is two problems. One, he is a little bit tainted by Partygate, but the second one was he's the richest MP in Parliament by a long way. And at a time when 80% of people have got less than £500 in a bank, well, that's it, right? But if you want someone that's going to look good on an international stage, someone that will speak well, someone that I think will be very honest, because he doesn't need to do that job for many reasons, he'd be the one I'd say. I think
he's not gonna try and get a tree house built in his back garden, is he?
Well, he could afford to buy the whole of Downing Street. He doesn't need to.
Exactly. Neill, who would you like to see?
Well, actually, I think it's quite interesting. There's two soldiers in the running. Tom and Ben are, ex-military, which I think is quite interesting given the times we face in Europe and the defence issues. As I said, we have challenges from Russia and China at the moment. I wouldn't discount Mark getting through the process. I think he will throw his hat in the ring. But actually, my favourite's probably Penny. I think it might actually be quite a sensible kind of take on what's happening in the world.
Okay, Talitha.
Do you know what? This accountability and this honesty, I think Rishi, he does it for me. I do really feel that he's very genuine, and I know he's really hit the hot seat with the whole, how wealthy he is and privileged, etc. But actually, he comes across really well. I would be quite proud of him standing up and representing us. But again, Penny, I think also, I think two really different candidates, but as having an ex-veteran or somebody with military background might be helpful, but maybe they could build a really good cabinet with a very diverse mixed range of people with different backgrounds, because that's what we're trying to attain, is a good mix of backgrounds and experiences. But I do like Rishi. It's a person, I'm very apolitical in my role, but actually whatever party he stood for, I just think he comes across very well. He's done a very good job. He's calm and measured, and I think we need someone calm and measured in these times.
Yeah, he looks very professional as well, isn't he? Neill, you put your hand up.
I was going to say, I think one of the issues that Rishi has, I think he did a great job through the pandemic, is the national insurance increases and some of the stuff around taxation. There was apparently quite a lot of friction.
But Neill, we don't want to go into it because we're running out of time. The country's broke; it needs to find the money. At the end of the day, people seem to be forgetting about COVID and the costs that have been racked up. Furlough wasn't free at the end of the day. My choice, by the way, if anybody really cares, is Sajid Javid. And the reason for that is that I actually have my photograph taken with him on a number of occasions, and photographs of him holding up Punchline.
I tell you what, Mark, his speech on Wednesday was brilliant. I was actually very disappointed with Boris yesterday because I thought he can turn off. He's a very good orator when he wants to be. I thought it was a poor speech, was Sajid's. I listened to it and I just couldn't, I was raptured. I thought he was very, very impressive.
Maybe he didn't have time. Maybe Boris needs to, think about
I
this.
think he just sounded angry. He just sounded really angry. And I thought, yeah,
Mark, you've not had your picture taken with him since he took out the restraining order, have you?
No, that's true.
Oh, that's true, yeah. Anyway, right, let's quickly run through the stories for Punchline. No, David, you've had your go, so I know you had your plug there, well done. And it is a great initiative, by the way, really, really great. Ian, what's the story from this week's Punchline, please?
Well, I agree with David. The Made in Gloucestershire is a really good idea. We had a bash at this a few years back. It's just a very, very good idea. And it's something I'm going to support. And also what you've done on Boris, newspapers, I'm an ex-Daily Mailman. Yesterday would have been a great day. I'd love that being at the centre of this. That doesn't happen anymore. And what you do is fill that vacuum. And that's important. That's good, incisive, instant news.
Thanks ever so much. There were three of us working on that, and it was a change. It was a change in rolling news, as you can imagine. Get it out for lunchtime. Yeah. I was saying, please resign before 1 o'clock. And it sounds terrible, but that's the news, isn't it? Thank you very much for that, Ian. That means an awful lot for coming from you. Talitha, what's the story that you've got a Punchline? I think you alluded to it earlier.
Yeah, I did. It was Lloyds Bank, your piece on debt services. I think this is where Lloyds have really, I guess, alarm bells when they're looking. I mean, people may have stuff stashed away, but essentially 80% of their customers have around £500 worth of savings. So, like anything, when you look at areas like homelessness, with 1 or 2 paychecks away, I think this is about all of us are very vulnerable in these times. I think just having these stats are really, really worrying. And that's why we need strong leadership. That's why we need someone to pull us through this. And I think essentially, you've got great charities like the CAB, the CAB, volunteers. This is when we really need our volunteers, because we're going to have a lot of people with debt going in absolutely desperate to sort things out. And that's where our charities really are going to be picking up the pieces. So let's hope we can get some strong leadership in line and we can start working towards a better future.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Talitha. Sam, what's the story that you picked up?
What's been said, I totally agree with the Made in Gloucester campaign is great. I sit on a working party with it. It's chaired by Dev Chakraborty and David's colleague, and it's brilliant. It's very exciting. And Talitha's point as well is very true. I mean, I'm a trustee of the Gloucester Food Bank, and I know that we have really got a lot of stock in now because we're anticipating quite a big wave of it. And throughout last year, very encouraging. The amount of donations we had broke all kinds of records, which shows that even when people got no money, they still look after the charities, but we're really going to need that food bank. And the story that I liked in Punchline this week, it was about Laithwaite's, which is a big Gloucester name, really. I know loads of people have worked at Laithwaite, introducing a paper wine bottle. And I just think we're all trying to be inventive about what we're going to do for our green future and what we can do to make things recycling. And so a bottle made of 94% recycled paper, I think it's just another inventive idea. And because Laithwaite is so associated with Gloucester, I thought it was a nice story. So pleased with that one.
Go on in. It's very quick.
Away from politics, what's the big story today? Big story is Cam Norrie, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is our story. Let's hope he gets through.
Definitely.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Ian. Neill, finally, not finally you, but finally you'll be the last person. What's a story that you picked out for Punch?
There was a couple in there, actually. I'm pretty worried about this, the police going into special measures and, what impact that's going to have for local policing. But to try and end on a bit of a high, the story about Airbus winning this mega order and, a bit of light at the end of the COVID tunnel. The aerospace industry has had a really rough time. They've just pulled in almost 300 aircraft on this order to the Chinese Airways in a very, very global market. I think that is fantastic news for the area, given that we supply a lot of those parts.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, people don't sometimes realise the connection. Really big story, that police and special measures. They're a bloody mess at the moment.
They're in a real mess, and that worries me. And I think to a certain extent, the politics overshadows some really, really important issues that are going on. I hope over the next 3 months that we concentrate on things like climate change, Ukraine, our own internal problems around the kind of living cost crisis that's going on.
Just go back to the police very, very quickly. These numbers of police officers they were hoping to recruit, there's absolutely no way on earth they're getting anywhere near that, by the way. Anyway, we kind of run out of time. We've got problems with the NHS, we've got problems with the police, we've got problems with the cost of living. Let's finish with a really good positive story, which actually I thought this week was Aqua Construction celebrating 25 years of business. Won a local company, done well, won a nice contract with the Forum, which he uses subcontractors as well. So all that money will trickle through to the local economy. Let's finish on something positive. A big thank you to my guests who called in at the last minute to come on this Business Breakfast Beefers Boris special. Hopefully you'll see us again next week. Thanks for joining Punchline Talks. Bye.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Oh, thanks for our sponsors. And if you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe if you got to this end. Bye.